when Stevie was bar mitzvah, he was about this tall. So I'm moving the microphone down because this is as tall as I am. If you have a cell phone, please turn it off or set it to stun. Is there a sorrow greater than this? Where is our consolation? Let our silence reach out to the bereaved parents and brother and grandparents and relatives and aunts and uncles and friends. Let their tears fall on us. Let their anger break against us. Let our love and our deeds speak for us. In the presence of boundless grief, the psalmist, the poet said, Ein od tefillah bisfatai. There is no longer prayer on my lips. Yet we must pray, just as we must weep, because we can do no other. O God, be now with the stricken family of our dear Stevie Grieshammer. Help them draw near to one another in their need for love and strength. Teach us to place our arms about them and to sorrow with them. Be with the mourners in their grief until hope breaks through like a bud in a dark corner of the earth. Baruch Dayan HaEmet, we praise the Judge of Truth. Begin with Psalm 121. Esai enai el haharim me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Al yitain lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hinei lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach b'layla. Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmar tzedcha v'uecha me'ata v'ad olam. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help cometh from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. The Lord will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. He is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all harm. He will guard your soul, your going and your coming, now and forever. And together let us recite in the English the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This morning, Stevie's father, Chuck, will eulogize Steve, and then friend Ben Peters will come forward. I will call you forward.
I want to thank Rabbi Matt for being here. I've been to enough funerals where it was obvious that the person presiding didn't really know the deceased very well. but Matt knew Stevie for a long time. Stevie identified as a Jew even though he, like myself, were non-believers. So he would be, like I am, uncomfortable with all the prayers. Well, one thing I love about the Jewish religion that I've learned since I met Sue is that to them, the life you lead is so much more important than what you believe. If you treat people well, that's what's important, and that's what Stevie did. So I think he would be quite happy that he has a service here. Thank you, Matt. One more thing about Matt that makes it appropriate that he be here. He was a diver for Cleveland Heights, and when the coach was desperate, he got tossed in on a relay at the slowest leg, so he understands what Stevie loved.
Come in third place.
Now, some of you are here because you know me, Sue, Tommy, or Stevie's aunts and uncles, and so you know how proud we were of Stevie, still are, how much we love him. Others of you are here because you knew Stevie, and you know why we're so proud of him. Who was he? He was a kind, sweet boy. He was just a great kid. He was generous and loving, fun-loving, and he was fun to be around. He was a very practical, organized, focused boy, responsible. He was smart, both in book smarts as well as common sense. He was stubborn, a hard worker, dedicated. He was a great and loyal friend, a great teammate, and a great leader. He had an infectious smile. He was a wonderful brother to Tommy, cousins. He was a wonderful nephew, grandson, and he was a wonderful son. He had a memory like an elephant. What did Stevie like to do? What did he love to do? He loved his family, us, me and Sue, his brothers, cousins, aunts, and uncles. He loved his friends and hanging and having fun with his friends. He loved to eat. He loved to go to buffets. We loved the all-you-can-eat buffets were a big thing. We loved travel, to explore. We loved our vacations at Disney World, Hilton Head, Vegas, Hawaii, Alaska, Europe. He loved the roller coasters at Cedar Point, the Cavs, the Browns, and he loved swimming. I'm going to give you some vignettes which will demonstrate, I think, some of these traits and characters and loves of Stevie. He loved his vacations, his family, and eating. When he was 6, I think it was about 6, we took a cruise to the Bahamas with his Uncle Jack, his cousins Josh and Justin, Aunt Linda, his grandfather. And we loved the unlimited food you could have in the ship. So one dinner he'd stuffed himself when his cousin Josh challenged him to an eating race. There was no contest. Stevie won. But 10 to 15 seconds later, he won the bringing up your food and refilling your plate contest as well. He loved vacations and he was a leader. When Tommy had his bar mitzvah, we asked, do you want to have a big party or do you want to take a nice vacation? And Tommy chose a nice vacation. So we took a Mediterranean cruise. It was a great trip. And Stevie's bar mitzvah, we asked him, what do you want? He said, I like that vacation too. So I was planning an Alaskan cruise. It turned out to be a great trip. But within a couple weeks, I noticed that Sue was also planning a big party. And I said, what in the world's going on? But with Stevie, we always said, we did what he told us. He was a leader in the house as well. He was responsible and a good friend. Mark Libertine, who's the father of John, one of his good friends, told me that he, like most parents of teens, was always concerned when John would go out, who he'd be seeing, where he'd be going. But he told me when he was with Stevie, we didn't have to worry whatsoever. We could relax because Stevie would always take care of him. Another friend, Max Weltman, had sent one of the letters in, and I really appreciated this. He said, I've never seen Stevie not do the right thing. Stevie loved to be with his family. My mother's side had 2 reunions in the last few years, and he loved it. He loved seeing the cousins, some of whom he hadn't met before. He loved to. We took a family history tour down in Roanoke, and he just really loved it when he saw his, his grandfather Metters. There was Metter in the grave we went to. There was like every other tombstone was a Metter. He loved traveling to Vermont to see his Uncle Brian, who held the family backstroke record until Stevie beat it this year. Well, I want to be fair, Brian. He destroyed it. He obliterated, gone. He loved cookouts at his grandfather Grieshammer's house. He loved driving to Columbus to celebrate his cousin Josh's birthday, especially getting the ice cream cake that Josh so loved. He loved Thanksgiving. It was his favorite holiday because the family was over and food. It was family and food that was so important to him. But the thing is, some of you might know we live kind of like slobs, and our house is always a mess. So whenever someone comes over, we would have to go out and clean the house. And Stevie, not saying he loved cleaning, but when it came to Thanksgiving, he'd be out there washing the inside and the outside of all the windows. He would look for the cobwebs. He would do everything because he loved it when they came over. He had an infectious smile. We got a lot of letters and notes online about Stevie from his classmates and friends, and I have to say we really, really appreciate it. I've read so many of them to Stevie while we were in the hospital, and so many of them told us about how his smile could make their day. Our good friend Vanessa Clapp from work, when Stevie was younger, she had a son, Robbie, who was Stevie's age, and her nieces would watch Stevie and Robbie when we were at work. And she told me one day at work, she said, "I don't care how down I am. When I see Stevie walking up the driveway with that beautiful smile of his, it just can't help but lift your spirits." He loved to travel, to explore, and being with family. When he was 9 years old, it was the last day of the summer championships. We left right from the meet and took a great trip. We drove out west. We had the four of us, Tommy, Stevie, Sue, myself, and his grandfather, Stanley. And it was tremendous. We went out, we saw in North Dakota, there's a Teddy Roosevelt National Park. There was bison there was these prairie dogs popping up. We went to Yellowstone, saw grizzly bears and bison, the geysers. We went to, what's it called? Little Bighorn, where he got to see his great-great-great-uncle's gravesite, who fought on the losing side of that battle. We went to Grand Teton, Jackson Hole. We dug for dinosaur bones in Wyoming and went to the lab and cleaned up the dinosaur bones. So afterwards, I asked him what his favorite memory from that trip was. I thought it might be the Yellowstone, which is such a beautiful place. And he said it was the Mall of America. It's a lot of money spent to go to a mall. He was a loyal friend and teammate. One of his good swimming friends, Sean Finnerty, and Stevie, they loved to swim together and challenge each other and encourage each other. But then Sean went back to his old team, but that didn't change Stevie's attitude about him. Whenever he would see him at the meets, he'd always say hello and encourage him, ask how he's doing. Stevie told me that his goal was not just to get him to state in the 500. He had so hoped that his friend Sean, his teammates Cameron Kim and Hayden Palmer, and his great training partner Brian Regovich, he hoped that all of them could make it to state because it wasn't just about him. He was a great teammate and loyal. He loved his family. He loved his brother Tommy. He loved and respected Tommy. Stevie lifted weights this past year and a half, because what his coach, John Fagan, had said, that speed is developed in the weight room. So he did weights, but the only person he listened to about that was Tommy. If I would make a suggestion, he'd say, well, I'll text Tommy and see what he thinks. And that love and respect went both ways. They were each other's biggest cheerleaders. Tommy would cheer the loudest for Stevie at meets. Stevie would actually miss a practice in off-season to go watch Tommy run. Now, Stevie was smart. We were playing cranium one time with his cousins Josh and Justin and Josh's wife Sarah. We had to guess what Tommy was drawing. He drew a circle with a squiggly line. And he wasn't done. He had a lot more to go. His cousin Josh says, a balloon, which I thought was a pretty good guess, but that wasn't it. Stevie yells out, mutation. Well, what in the world is mutation? Tommy says, that's it. And we asked, wait, and we see the card. He was right. I always thought that that showed how smart Stevie was, but Sue said, and I think she's correct, it showed more how close and in sync he was with his brother Tommy, that he would see what he was doing. Now, I said Stevie was smart, but he had a great sense of proportionality. He was practical. He was focused. He was a very good student. I think his GPA was like a 4.07, and that was done while not missing a single morning or Saturday or Sunday workout or doing weights in addition to the regular training. So that was pretty impressive. He did that, and he didn't do that with as much studying as you might think. He used a cost-benefit approach to his studying. Very practical. If it required a lot of time or study for him to raise a grade from a B to an A, he'd just take the B and use that extra time on a couple of other courses where it took a modest effort for him to raise it up and get an A. He was on top of his grades, and he knew what he needed to do to keep his 4-point. His goal in school was to do well enough in high school so that he could go to be accepted in any school he wanted to swim at. So he did that. He loved to eat. He loved to travel. By the way, I noticed that Taco Bell stock fell since Stevie's illness. The Mayfield team stopped at a pizza place after a meet. We went to Erie. And Stevie ordered a regular pizza and a large sub, all for himself. And his coach Rick saw that and said, "You can't eat that." And I'm not sure if he was doubting that he could eat it or if he thought that was a bad idea. But anyways, Stevie ate it all, and he later told me that Rick gave him a fist bump in admiration of his efforts. He loved the buffets. Our Sunday brunches, we would go to the Calabashes down at Myrtle Beach. And his favorite, the Caesar's Palace Palladium Buffet. We went there one time with his cousin, Aubrey, and her husband, Pat, myself, Sue, Tommy, and his grandfather. And we were there like 2 hours, and we were all doing damage to the buffet, Stevie in particular. And we thought we were done. We were all just sitting there. And I think Tommy said, "Oh, man, I want one more of those lamb chops," because they were good. And so Stevie couldn't let that go. He had to get one also. And when he was done, his eyes kind of glazed over. And I'm thinking, he is not going to make it, but he slowly but surely walked back to our hotel about a half mile away and held it in, because he was not going to be beat by Tommy. He loved amusement parks. He loved Cedar Point. He loved the roller coasters. When he was, I'm guessing he was about 6, every year, I remember this when I was young, how you couldn't wait to grow enough, be big enough to ride the roller coaster. And he was so looking forward. This was a year he was going to be able to ride his first roller coaster, the Iron Dragon. And we went there with my friend Matt Medovic and his sons Mitch and Jeff. And he was finally tall enough, but when we got there, they had raised the limit over the year before. I felt horrible. What's he going to do? But he took it very well. He said, "Well, I'll do it next year." And it was funny that day, someone gave him a little basketball, and he spent, Sue said the first time she realized that he could actually have a decent basketball skills. And he dribbled that basketball like for 3 hours straight, all around the park, everywhere we go. He just loved that. He loved playing games with his family. He loved playing cribbage with his grandfather, Grieshammer. He loved playing Smash in the evenings with his swim friends, and Ben Braungard, Andrew Whiteman. He loved playing euchre with the seniors on the team when he was a sophomore, Brandon Rudolph and Anthony Piazza, Ben Peters. He loved playing basketball. His buddies John Libertine, Jack Milroy and Kean, Elon Cabo and Jordan Cobb. He loved Wednesdays at Brugger's with his buddy Justin Daher, campfires in the backyards with Clay and Nick Cunningham, Carmen and Jordan. He loved running around and playing games with the whole Daher clan, our neighbors. And he loved game nights with his cousin Aubrey and Patrick. He was a team leader. He loved the traditions of the swim team, the dyed hair, the mohawks, which so many people thought was odd. One of his teammates, Clay, had wrote that in one of these letters that he had first resisted Stevie's efforts to get him to dye his hair, but he said eventually he realized that these traditions are what brought the team close together, connected them with the kids of the past teams. And he was glad that Stevie insisted on it. And Stevie was a leader. He loved our traditions too. He loved watching the Macy's and Rose Parade with me. He loved going to Peek and Peek every Christmas where we would watch the Christmas Story marathons. We loved his Uncle Wayne bringing pizzelles and deviled eggs to every family picnic. He loved eating an Easter brunch with his grandfather, Grieshammer. Now, Stevie was generous. I think his friends and family all know that, but what some of you may not know is that he was an organ donor. And I want to let you know what happened with all that. A lot of you may know it was causing all sorts of grief as far as getting this funeral organized, because we had no idea, because we had to deal with, it's a lot more complicated than I should have known it, but I didn't think about it, how much more complicated it was. But as of right now, his pancreas is going to be used for research. His lungs are in someone else's body. His kidneys have been given to 2 separate people. And his liver was cut in half so that 2 more people could live. So 5 people could live a longer, better life because of Stevie's generosity. Last thing I want to talk about with Stevie is that he loved being a swimmer. He loved being part of a swim team. He was a great teammate and leader. For him, those 2 traits were inseparable. He loved to swim fast and train hard for himself, but he wanted his teammates to do well also. He led by example for sure, because if you're not willing to do it, how can you ask other people to do it? But he was vocal in his encouragement to his teammates. One of his buddies, Matt Vanone, talked about training with Stevie, and Matt was happy because he hit the goals he wanted, and Stevie says, "You can do better than that, come on." And he says, and I did. So many of his teammates sent letters and talked about Stevie encouraging all of them to push harder, giving high fives and fist bumps after they swam good sets. He loved to practice. Meets were important, but for him, he loved the practice and the process of training. He had goals for every event in meets, of course, but he also had specific goals for every event in practice. If he met a goal in a meet, we'd give him 1 Arizona fruit punch. If he met a practice goal, he'd get 2 Arizona fruit punches, because he knew that that's what mattered, that's what's going to get you to where you wanted to go. Now, Sue would kill me if I spent all my time on swimming, because she didn't share mine and Stevie's love for swimming, or as she would call it, craziness or obsession. But Stevie was certainly so much more than just a swimmer, and I know that, and that's why I've talked about some of these other things. But it was very much important to him in the last few years. It had become a huge part of his life, as he was fond of saying, swimming is life. For now and for the future in the college, that would have been true. Eventually, it would have given way to other dreams. But I'm going to put this obsession into perspective. My old swimming coach, Bob Busmead, told me that there's nothing inherently valuable in being able to swim from one wall to the other faster than anyone else. There's nothing important about that. Swimming fast isn't important in life. It's fun. Having a great PR is fun to do. To swim fast is fun. But what was important is what swimming taught you about life and how it helped make you a better person. I don't know how much of Stevie's own traits he brought to swimming and how much he learned from swimming. But I'm going to tell you this story about the district meet this year. It was his great disappointment. I'm going to tell you about how he dealt with it and what it tells us about Stevie as a man. He's always been a pretty good swimmer, and I knew that eventually he'd be a great swimmer. Before this year, he'd do well, he'd place, but he wouldn't win. Kids who were bigger, stronger, and had matured faster than he had, quicker than he had, they didn't necessarily work like him, but they beat him. He was a boy competing against men. But I knew him, I knew his hard work, I knew his drive and dedication, and how physically strong he was, even without the man muscles. I knew it was going to change, I just didn't know if it would happen in high school or college. Last spring, after his sophomore year, he told me his goal this year was to make states and asked if he could do it. I said, well, it's kind of a long shot. I thought you have a better chance maybe as a senior. But depends how much you grow. You can control how hard you work, but you can't control how fast you grow. Well, fortunately, he did grow this year, finally maturing. And by the fall, he was swimming faster in practice than he had in meets last year. He made huge improvements, and by the sectional meet, he swam a 4:47, which was less than 2 seconds off the time it took to make state. At that point, we gave him an excellent chance to make it. What started as a pipe dream, really, had been very close to reality. But things don't always work out as we like, as we plan, as we want. At districts, instead of dropping 2 seconds, he added 2 seconds. was probably the biggest disappointment in his life. He was devastated. That night he went home, he went to bed, and he didn't come down for 12 hours. When he came down, I asked him how he's doing. Are you done with your morning? He said, that's done. He says, I'm going to have breakfast, and then I'm going to go lift weights. I think I messed up by stopping weights too soon, he said. I lost too much strength. He'd spent a night feeling down, but that was done. It was time to start working on the next year. That next week, he was back at a good point. He was swimming great again. He actually earned 6 Arizona fruit punches that week. He'd done 2 PRs, all-time best, during practice. He was swimming faster than he had before sectionals. This weekend was a senior meet, and he was expected, no doubt he was going to be doing some great times, and some of the events they don't do in high school, the longer events which Stevie would be specializing in college. It was very important because he wanted to get the attention of some of the college coaches, and you got to have these times. So on Saturday morning of the state meet, the day he got sick, he was looking at the state results, and he saw what it took to make the A final in the 500. And he said, I can do that. He said, I'm going to make the podium next year. And I have absolutely no doubt he would have done it. Now, again, I don't know if it's what Stevie brought to swimming or what it taught him, but this great district disappointment shows that Stevie knew that hard work doesn't always bring results at first or second, but if you keep doing it, hard work does pay off. For Stevie this year, it paid off with a great year. The disappointment he suffered didn't stop him. He was going to be even better next year. And if he didn't get exactly what he wanted next year, he'd continue working hard and would pay off in college. Stevie knew it wasn't just hard work that helped you get where you wanted. It was perseverance, the hard work day in and day out that pays off. To get where you want to go, you have to keep at it. His sectional swim, where he swam a PR and was the sectional champ, it wasn't important because he was faster than anyone else, than the rest of the swimmers. It was important because it was his reward for his perseverance. That's a lesson he learned, and that's a lesson that all of us could learn from Stevie. What did the future hold for Stevie? Based on his character, I think we can be pretty sure he'd be successful in his career, his life, as a man, as a father. He'd succeed in his dreams at state. He'd succeed in his dreams in swimming in college. These last few years, his dreams have all been about swimming, but that would change with time. Just like when he was younger, he had different dreams. When he was 4 years old, me and Sue were talking to him. We asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. And he answered, I want to be a tiger. You know, in retrospect, there's really no reason why a 4-year-old wouldn't think you could grow up to be a tiger. But as it turns out, I think he made that dream come true. To anyone who swam with him, they know he was a tiger. Now, I've got tons of things I could say, but I'm not going to. I know the legal people in the audience are probably cringing when I got up here knowing that I can go on for 2 or 3 hours. But I'm done. We are going to have one of his peers, one of his friends, Ben Peters, come up here. We got a lot of letters. I had people, as you know, send me stuff that was on the internet, etc., because I have difficulty doing all that stuff. And the Twitter stuff, I can't do that, but they gave it to me. And it was so important for us. Everything I had that came through, I was reading to Stevie as we were in the hospital, and we still had our hopes. And I know for a while I don't know how much he understood, but he was hearing these things. And they were so important for us at that time. I've read them since then, and I know I will be reading them in the next weeks, months, and years. They've given us great, great comfort. And I know a lot of his friends had great things to say about him, but one of the notes that we got was from Ben Peters, and he wrote a story describing his friendship with Stevie. I thought Ben did a great job, and I thought in showing what a good leader, teammate, and friend Stevie was. And I think what he's going to say, I think could be applied to all the friends of Stevie's. But Susie and I and Tommy are very, very grateful that Ben agreed to tell this story to you. Where's Ben? Ben, want to come up? Thank you, Matt.
Good morning. I'm Ben Peters, a close friend and former teammate of Stevie. Thank everybody for being here this morning to celebrate the life of such an incredible person. While Steve was in the hospital, his father requested that people send well wishes and stories to have read to him. The story I'm going to share to you was read to Stevie while he was incapacitated, and I hope desperately that he heard it. Though this story is from my own personal experience with Steve, the sentiments shared through it speak on behalf of all of Steve's friends and teammates. Steve and I shared many lasting memories with each other throughout the years. I'll never forget our trips to Cedar Point, our riveting conversations inside Taco Bell, and our many euchre victories over Brandon and Anthony, especially the one that Rick watched us win. However, one particular set of memories I shared with Steve tower high above the rest. I took some time off of swimming after my junior year, and it was during that time that I began to play around with the idea of quitting the sport. Thankfully, after discussions with friends and family, including Steve, I decided to stick it out my last season. I entered my final season incredibly out of shape, with no expectations for myself, and had little confidence that I'd be well enough prepared in time to perform at the big meets. A few weeks into the season, Steve and I timed a middle school swim meet. It was there that Steve tried to convince me that when February came around, I was going to make the cut for the district meet in the 200 IM, a feat I'd never achieved before. My rebuttal to him was quite simple. How was I going to make the district meet for the first time if I could hardly compete in practice? But as the weeks passed, Steve remained insistent on his prediction. One night in January, we were playing euchre after a meet and decided to take a break. Steve got out a piece of paper to write down what he realistically projected would be my splits, each split for my 200 IM. And we added up the splits to compare it to the district time and found that the time he projected would qualify for the district meet. And what I found was that Steve was right the whole time. I did have a chance to make that meet. When it came time for me to swim at the sectional meet, Steve stood behind me behind the block leading up to my race. He slapped me a few times across the face, and I slapped him back. It was a pump-up routine that we both shared. And after my race ended, I looked up at my time to see that it was faster than what Steve had projected it to be. Steve was screaming above me, but I was too disoriented and exhaustion to comprehend what he was saying. I didn't have the energy to pull myself out of the pool, so Steve reached down and helped pull my body out of the water. I laid down next to the diving block and felt like I was going to pass out. The next heat of the event needed to step up, and I was still in the way, so Steve came up from behind me and dragged my body far away from the pool and frantically congratulated me. Steve was there for me from beginning to end. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and I'll always remember that. Thank you, everybody.
These recollections and tributes are really spoken as a prayer. And so let us together say Amen. In this week's Torah portion, the Torah portion will read this Shabbat. There's a beautiful reminder of Stevie. The parasha is Parashat Vayakel. It's Exodus chapter 35. And as our ancestors continued to schlep through the wilderness on their way to the promised land, they were commanded to construct the tabernacle. The tabernacle was the portable temple. And when they camped, they would assemble it, and when they were to break camp, they would disassemble it, and then they would continue their journey to the next destination. So they were commanded to bring material gifts for its construction. Everything was going according to plan. The people brought gifts, and then they continued to bring gifts and continued to bring gifts. There was just one problem. Our ancestors didn't know when to stop bringing. And if you've ever had to be part of a capital campaign or a building project, that's not usually the problem. I mean, people usually figure when to stop giving before you need them to stop giving. But this teaching in Exodus chapter 35 and then in Exodus chapter 36, Moses has to make a proclamation. Let no man or woman make further efforts toward gifts for the sanctuary. As you think about Stevie and his legacy, This Torah teaching describes him in so many ways, because in so many ways he didn't know when to stop either. This story here, this episode, so many others. He was caring and he was generous of spirit. He was loving and a friend to many, and we thank God that he didn't know when to stop being all of those things. As we have heard from those who spoke earlier, Stevie was a good and decent young man. And by the way, the older you get, the more you realize how difficult it is to be a decent person. There are so many temptations, so many distractions. Wait, I'm not sure I checked my cell phone. Oh, wait. That's usually what people do instead of looking in the eye. A decent person looks in the eye when conversing with someone else. It's not an insult to say someone is kind and good and decent. If you really look at someone's behavior, good and decent is actually extremely high praise. We live in an age of superlatives. We were at the Cavaliers game last night, rooting for a victory for Stevie. It didn't work. They did not play decently. But let's remember this. When you talk about somebody being the greatest of all time, you know, the GOAT, G-O-A-T, greatest of all time, in every endeavor, people argue about this. Who's the greatest this? Who's the most incredible that? Who's the coolest this? Who's the most brilliant that? But remember, to be reliable and consistent and sweet, those are really the most important characteristics, and Stevie was those things. He was respectful, and he was there for you when you needed encouragement and a smile. And these are fine attributes to emulate. We live in between behaviors of the greatest and the worst. In Stevie's loving memory, let us behave in ways which will describe us as good and decent. Maybe even better than good, but good and decent is very good. His Hebrew name was Melech Yosef. Melech means king. Yosef means God has added. And those are good to follow too. He was a leader, like a king, but a benevolent king, except when he's really, giving you grief. And God has added. So be a person that adds goodness to your interactions in the world. He was a kind and helpful person, and as you know, he was an organ donor. So his sudden death it appears to us like lightning which strikes ground from a clear blue sky, and we grope for words. There's so much left that he wanted to do. There's so much left that you wanted to do with him. There's so much left that he had wanted to say, so much left that you wanted to say and share with him. And although we do not know why, God has called Steve's soul to return to the reservoir of being. And so Stevie has breathed his last. There is no pain or deterioration for him of his body or his mind. There is just rest and wholeness and peace. Just as the Sabbath day is a day of rest and a time of rest, so too for Stevie, it's a time of rest for him. His soul is returning to God and to be with the souls of his relatives and ancestors of our people. We learn this in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 7. The dust returns to the earth as it was. The spirit returned to God who gave it. We talk about this as Olam Haba, the world to come. It's not a place. This is a place. Cemetery is a place. Olam Haba is a time, an eternal time. And we believe that his soul will be in this eternal time, and God will take care of his soul. And that one day, your soul will be with his. In the casket, the family has allowed us to send along a well-read from copy of the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, and an old prayer book. because not only is it a mitzvah, a religious obligation to escort the body of our loved one to its final resting place, but also to provide respectful burial for holy books of our tradition. Our memories are filled to overflowing with thoughts of Stevie Grieshammer, and we give thanks to God for this gift of life, although we are terribly struck by his death. As we think of Stevie, be helpful and kind. Have a sense of humor. Smile, even in the pain. And do these things in his loving memory. For only through the deeds which we perform can the world be compensated for his loss. And so we say, with tears in our eyes, words from the first chapter of the book of Job. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. The Lord hath given, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, yimru, amen. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. God who causes peace to reign in the high heavens, God, please send peace to us, upon all Israel, upon humanity, and upon the soul of our dearly departed Stevie Grieshammer. And let us say Amen. Please rise for the El Malei Rachamim prayer. Into your care we entrust the spirit of Steve Grieshammer. For God, you keep faith with your children in death as in life. Sustain us that we may meet with serenity the mysteries that lie ahead, knowing that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you, O God, are with us, a loving friend in whom we put our trust. You are the light of our life, our hope in eternity. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hametzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim U'Tahorim, Kezohar HaRakiam Asirim, Et Nishmat Melech Yosef ben Shoshana, Shahalach L'Olamo, Baal HaRachamim, Yastirehu B'Seter Kenafav L'Olamim, Vayitzror B'Tzror HaChaim, Et Nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Melech Yosef ben Shoshana, our dear Steve, our dear Stevie Grieshammer. He has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Please be seated. In a moment, we will be given instructions by the the gentlemen who work here at the funeral home for the procession to Lakeview Cemetery. Stevie will be on the Kaddish list at Temple Israel Ner Tamid and other congregations as well. Our services are every Friday night at 7:30. He'll be on the Kaddish list, and then we're saying Kaddish for him on Wednesdays for the Hebrew school kids who need reps in the Kaddish. And on Sunday mornings, we'll say Kaddish for him as well. They need reps in the Kaddish. It's like swimming. You need reps. And immediately after the interment, we'll be going to the family's house at 6456 Woodhawk Drive. We'll light the Shiva candle, do a very brief prayer, and then we'll gather together for the mourner's meal. If you're not going to the cemetery, we'll probably be at the family's house in about an hour and a half from now. And they'll be there until 7 o'clock tonight, and then tomorrow and Tuesday, 2 to 4 and 6 to 8. And if you care to make donations in Stevie's loving memory, there's nothing indicated, which means that any place that you... Yes. Oh, you do have two things. Mayfield Athletic Boosters, and the second thing is a Ronald McDonald. It's probably on Facebook or something that you and I don't even know about, right? Right. Okay, so Mayfield Athletic Boosters and Ronald McDonald, and any other place that you deem appropriate after those first two continue, much as Stevie, didn't know when to stop. These organizations will be very grateful for your generosity.